The following is for information purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. All opinions and views expressed by the contributors to this podcast are in a personal capacity only. They do not represent the views of Progressive Equity Research or any other organisation mentioned in this podcast.
Welcome to Talking Tech from Progressive with George O'Connor and myself, Ian Robertson, the podcast where we talk about the UK small and mid-cap listed tech market and try and bring some facts and understanding to bear. Hello, George. Been a few weeks. I've been moving house, been away on holiday, but what have you been up to?
Oh, God, Ian. Well, firstly, welcome back. You were missed. Sadly, in the interregnum, I've just become almost too afraid to walk away from my desk at the moment. I'm on full-time bubble watch. I don't know if you've spotted or not, but there's almost a daily deluge of doom-laden forecasts about the state of the tech market on bubble. If any of these forecasts prove accurate, it'll be bubble bath that I'll be on. Now, having worked through and after the Dotcom, I'm well aware that today's market backdrop is markedly different and the parallels can often be overstated. However, Ian, I think it would be great if you could give us the benefit of your insight as you look back through them to really get everyone on the same page.
Thanks, George. Well, one of the odd things that happened while moving house was a book turned up.
Just one.
When you move, you have these purge of everything, or you fail to have a purge of anything. And the book that turned up was a thing called F''D, Spectacular Dotcom Flameouts. It's a little bit of an irreverent book from sort of 2002, 2003 times, but I thought it was interesting to sort of go back over it and sort of see how people were thinking about that bubble and how that bubble burst, and the mindsets and the mistakes that were made, because it's fairly clear looking back in time that bubble mistakes are made as the bubbles develop, but also as the bubbles explode and people change their behaviour and look back in anger. In terms of what comes out of going through this book, it's a run through mainly of the US .com story. It's where things went wrong. The thing that really stands out is just how small everything was. Nowadays, we are talking about trillions of dollars. Back then, we were talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. When you talk about the total CapEx spend, how much was chucked out over a series of years into the telecom and internet world, it doesn't get to the trillions. It gets to sort of 500, 600, maybe $700 billion. It's not huge because basically the digital world wasn't huge. There wasn't actually the capacity to sort of apply that much spend out there. So whilst we look back and think, God, it was mad, it was all pervasive. Yes, it was all pervasive. It was lots of news flow, but it wasn't driving the economy really, other than just at the margins. We look at the big names and we look at what actually happened. There are lots of key learnings. The first thing is the fact that a lot of the things that came to an abrupt end in 2001, 2002, and are generally ridiculed in these books, actually, they worked in the long term. Webvan was destroyed by everybody. Everybody mocked it. It was nearly $1 billion was thrown away on food retailing and delivery. Well, how much has been thrown away on Ocado? But eventually, the mainstream supermarket retailers have worked out how you do it, and they worked out a product market fit and to be profitable in this area. Ocado still haven't, but that's more the problem of UK fund managers not working out what they're doing, really. And other various areas in retail, pets.com, that crashed spectacularly. Furniture.com, that crashed spectacularly. Daft mistakes were made. Furniture.com really struggled with its supply chain. Had lots of mom and pop suppliers, but we look back only a few years and we had Made.com suffered exactly the same problem. So things change, things repeat themselves, but we shouldn't dismiss anything that comes in front of us now and doesn't work as doomed always not to work. When we look at it, there were some pretty stupid ideas. My favourite is a thing called iHarvest, which was a online application which allowed you to save web pages. Your favourite web pages, what you had to do was click on iHarvest, and it would save your web page for you, which I think possibly suggests that people weren't really understanding it. And yeah, it grabs a headline.
Did you have a facility to print them out?
Print them out. Yep. I'll read the internet when I finish printing it off type mentality.
I'll fax it back to you. Don't worry.
All told, that actually only brought in a couple of million of funding. So yeah, it grabs the headline and it's completely daft, but it wasn't where the money was really going. EMI did something completely stupid with a thing called Music Maker, which was you could create your own CDs online for $10 a pop. Now that, looking back, looks completely bonkers, particularly when you realise that EMI had rights to very little of the actual market of music that people wanted to record to their own CDs. Yep, it crashed and burned. Go.com crashed and burned, and that was where Disney thought it was a great idea to let's build Yahoo, but with Disney content. Surprise, surprise, rather than just go to a website with just Disney content, they created something that no one wanted to go to because it was just like Yahoo, which they no longer wanted to go to anyway. Other bonkers ideas that generally castigated in this book, digital currencies. Do you remember them? Flues, beans. They had some slightly bonkers business model.
Remember beans?
Beans was where you got paid for visiting websites. All told, they only added up to a couple of $100 million of wasted money. But it was interesting in the review of trying to find out why Beans and Flues got it wrong, as it were, in terms of the mindset of the time. No one pointed out that these companies didn't have their own ledgers. Digital currencies, back then we all said, how do you get people to use these currencies? And we're actually saying that now. Doesn't stop people buying them and investing in them, in inverted commas, but that's perhaps for another time. I think the biggest frustration, disappointment, I'm not quite sure, screaming at history in this whole process for me was application service providers, because to be honest, I had to a certain extent forgotten about what these little businesses did.
I think everyone has forgotten about ASPs, but why do you want to talk about ASPs? It was very much a niche area.
It was a niche area. These businesses failed along with a lot of other .com because things didn't get delivered on time. Broadband didn't happen on time. Regulation stood in the way in a lot of countries.
Yes.
We also saw a lot of problems in terms of hardware development not coming through.
It was the era of 2.5G, so we were flying along.
Yes, well, I have to admit that I did leave out the WAP companies.
Wireless Application Protocol. Get in there.
That lasted for 4.5 months, if I remember rightly, in the middle of 2000. Why we desperately tried to pretend in Europe that somehow or other Europe was going to ride in and save the day by making the entire internet mobile. That didn't work. Anyway, back to application service providers and why they failed. Well, application service providers are companies that provide functionality over the internet, a little bit like a software functionality. The two that I pulled out from the book were Bidland and Lipstream. Now, Bidland allowed you to run an auction process on your website. That was terribly exciting in 2001, perhaps not so exciting in 2002, 2003, when websites just didn't have the traffic and the interest, and everybody was going to a certain limited number of auction sites. And Lipstream was a company that provided a piece of software so that on a website, a customer service website, you could click a button and you could talk to someone at the company, customer service representative, via voice over IP. That's a great idea. And we think, think about that now. There are plenty of applications where you see, click on a website, click on a customer service. I can talk to someone. Maybe I'm not talking to them directly now, as it turns out, because we tried to sort of unvoice everybody. But the reason it failed was basically because voice over IP was woefully inadequate compared to here's a telephone number to ring. But these things have moved on. And you look at what people have now. You say to someone, if I were to do customer service, if I wanted to talk to someone, how would I do it? And they'd say, well, put a button on the website and do voice over IP. And you go to your web developer and say, I want this. And they'll go and find an application to do it. They will find the equivalent of an application service provider to do it for us. These things have now happened. It has taken a long time for these things to come through. But I think the lesson is that we shouldn't dismiss things that are difficult to deliver over the next 3 to 4 years as being impossible to deliver, because the logic should be there for things. The thing that really strikes me is agentic AI, is that it's going to be an absolute nightmare. And people are going to have it fail, and people are going to find all sorts of wonderful excuses as to why it doesn't work. But I think long term, it is going to work. Quite how the market develops and how the investment community reacts to its short term problems is going to be interesting to see.
How wide, Ian, is the gap between the underlying applicability of the technology and where we are in terms of valuation? Because bubbles are all about valuation rather than the suitability of the technology. And I make this point because if we think about sort of bubble discussion, it really turns into a discussion about the Mag 7, then it turns into a discussion around Nvidia. To put some numbers on the discussion, Nvidia today has a sort of a PE of 44. Your sort of, UK standard tech, maybe it's on 19. The comparable in the US is on a PE of 30, thereabouts. However, the interesting part is the data center revenue growth. That grew by 56% in the last quarter. The FCF margin on it is 29%. It's producing some amazing numbers, and these amazing numbers deserve some premium. And then your discussion is it too far, too high? But when you look at what they're doing, the strength of the operating model and the developing use cases, multiple use cases, are far stronger now than anything I'd seen in the era of Dotcom. You make the very interesting point that the numbers are different in the sense they were small, but also the prove out is so much stronger. Now, I appreciate your commentary around every tech cycle ushers in new cohorts of companies and technologies. So don't throw everything out in the middle of this debate. But I think there has been some learning in terms of the lessons of .com, even if it's subtly are being applied to today's industry leaders.
Yes, I think we're going to have a lot of proof points and we'll have a lot of sort of denial points as well. And it's almost to the way the sentiment in the market turns as to whether it wants to listen to the proof points or the denial points.
And of course, tech valuation is always a matter of fundamentals and sentiment. And the blowback from any bubble bursting in the US will actually be a sentiment driver as it washes through into the UK.
In terms of the Mag 7, the valuations, you can see reference points.
Yeah.
And in the private market, it's a little bit difficult to see those reference points in terms of how big is the market, what are we doing. But actually, whilst we say we can see reference points on the valuations of the Mag 7, it's really only Nvidia that is actually the AI valuation, because it's only Nvidia that is being driven purely by AI. All the others, the numbers, they're non-AI numbers.
Right.
We're not seeing that as the fundamental driver of everything in that business, or we are seeing it as the driver of growth. It has to be said in a number of them.
Yeah. The only thing is, while you've been away on holidays / moving, I did look into the UK AI, and here I looked at the UK AI native companies. So typically founded post 2020. I mean, they're all private companies, of course. They're all small, of course. But just to say that Nvidia number and chuck that back. So this group, 33 UK private companies, they're growing revenue at 75%. So that's great. That's impressive. Clearly is telling us about early stage in a product life cycle. Their FCF margin is minus 140%. So you can say, George, of course, it's early. They've got to be cash consumptive at this stage. But at the same time, I was disappointed because you're looking at Nvidia and you think, wow, well, who is the category defining company and how good are they? They are very good in terms of the numbers that they are presenting.
Yes, but I think it's harsh to compare anyone to Nvidia because Nvidia has got this central hub, bearing point type valuation where everybody depends upon it. We know that without it, everything sort of falls apart. But I think when we look to the UK companies, I actually going back to the whole sort of looking back to 2000, 2001, 2002.
Yes.
To be honest, I draw heart because, okay, you can take the mindset that, oh, God, UK companies, we can't produce tech companies. There's no way these AI companies that we're talking about now could be anything like what they have in the US. Well, actually, we go back to the bubble, the .com bubble. We managed to produce the same kind of stories, the same kind of businesses back then. Okay, they may not have been quite on the same scale. We managed to have FreeServe grow as a business with multi-million subscribers within a matter of, 18 months of being created.
And introduce the concept of free, which is the other thing.
Yes.
Pricing models changed then.
I mean, just to be able to turn pricing models and way in which operators, subscriber businesses, and the customers all interact, just the level of sort of let's turn this industry on its head. That was a UK company that did that. We had lastminute.com. Okay, it wasn't a rip-roaring success as a business, but at least it does demonstrate that a bunch of UK entrepreneurs can sit down and say, hey, there's a market opportunity with a new technology. We will turn it into a valuable business. It didn't make any money as a listed company, but it made money for a lot of people along the way. And it still does actually survive as a brand. And clearly we know that the whole idea of online travel, it's the way we travel and the way we think about leisure time.
Can I ask you to roll back for a minute? You sidled into a discussion and then sort of moved off it. And that was really in terms of lessons learned from history. You mentioned agentic AI.
Yes.
Where were you going to take that? Before I sidelined you, yes.
It's just damn difficult, isn't it? I mean, let's face it.
At the moment, that is the holy grail. That is where so much points to in terms of developing AI use cases outside of Nvidia.
Yes, I think there is this, the media, the mass public, are looking one way, which is towards the LLM. They think, oh, wonderful things that the AI can do in terms of creating content, handling content. But it's actually making the world more efficient on the agentic side of things. That is where the big opportunity lies. Because if you think, oh, I could use AI for sending emails, well, actually, if you use AI correctly and agentic, half the reason for emails to exist goes out the window anyway, because everything becomes a seamless process, because AI understands how companies, entities, corporations, things work. So you don't need people interfering, sending emails, creating PowerPoint packs.
I don't think it's people interfering. I'm looking forward to my digital twin sending those emails, freeing me up, rather than they don't need to be sent.
Yes, we don't really need an LLM model to start sending emails between agents within an AI environment. So I think that element of the story is probably lost on people. But it is going to be extremely difficult because people, businesses, enterprises, public corporations, public entities have developed over decades, in some cases hundreds of years, to work in certain ways. And it's going to need not going to much unpicking, but a way in which you can knit things together.
I think unpicking is a better word, to sort of surface and be transparent around so much of the corporate world, which, as you said, has been built up over decades, generations, would in itself be truly enlightening.
Yes. Going back to 2000, what did everyone like to complain about? What's wrong with technology? The thing that most people sort of brought up to say, what's wrong with technology, would be SAP. To say, is this really helping anybody? It's just causing so many problems for everybody. Everybody would have to reorganize their businesses in a certain way to fit with the way that this software product works.
But that was the wonderful thing about SAP in terms of their ability to drive standardization, because if you wanted it, you had to march to their process.
Exactly.
Not your own.
But the reason that was in place was because it was so nightmarishly difficult to implement that. You can only think how nightmarishly difficult it can be to measure, control, test. And that's the big thing that we all forget about. It's testing that actually is the thing that takes the time in developing any kind of application or system.
Yes, and that appears to be one of the wins from agentic early ROI.
Indeed.
Very good. How exciting. Ian, on that bombshell, crikey, where are we all going in the next couple of weeks? Can you see any short-term catalysts? Clearly, you're going to say global macro, stuff in America, cost of capital. Is there any other area that folks should be looking at? Again, putting on that hat that's taking you back to .com and what started, what drove the deflation. Was it just a realization stuff was too expensive?
There was a realization that stuff was too expensive as it went up. I mean, you have to be honest about this. It's a bit difficult. Having been a fund manager and you were screaming sell in the sort of last months of the whole thing, even though it has to be admitted that I was part of a fund launch in April 2000.
You've made some really interesting points around SAP R3, and it wasn't a coincidence, but clearly you had that big surge in tech spend into Y2K to stop airplanes falling out of the sky. And then they didn't fall out of the sky. So there seemed to be some realization then that, good God, we've spent a fortune, we haven't got anything out of it, i.e. people wanted to see bodies on the streets. And I wonder to what extent that pulled the plug. I can recall back in the day, it was some bank, and I can't remember which bank it was, but they had just told a load of CMG, if you remember that company, consultants to leave because there was no more work for them. And that for me was a catalyst that, oh crikey, all of this has been built up and now it can start to be dismantled.
It's okay to distrust the tech talk.
Yeah.
Well, we touched on this a few weeks back because first of all, we had the planes don't fall out of the sky. Then we had AOL Time Warner. And then we had to wait a few months before the big telecoms companies started to report things not going quite according to plan to the extent they went bust. And then we started to see the problems with the rollouts of mobile.
This was my WAP banking application, wasn't it? I'm to blame.
You didn't use your WAP banking application.
That was my problem, yes.
Well, it didn't help that your T78 Ericsson being the only phone that you could actually use couldn't get in anybody's hands, and we certainly didn't have any colour screens, and the handwriting recognition was rubbish. And the only people who got them were analysts.
Otherwise, success.
And I was left-handed, so it didn't recognise my handwriting anyway.
Very, very good. On that bombshell, Ian, absolutely great to chat and take a trip down memory lane, because it's only through knowing about history can we be forewarned about likely developments.
How right you are.
Many thanks for that stroll.
Okie dokie. She'll talk to you anon.
Brought to you by Progressive Equity.